Hi everybody, welcome to the vMix Funtime Live Show October edition. My name's Tim, and to my right here is my usual co-host, Martin, who is the CEO of the vMix initiative. So today's a bit of a special show. We're live streaming in 4K 60 to YouTube, so we're kind of pushing live streaming right to the edge here at vMix, where we're doing a 4K 60 record, production, and stream from one computer and sending that out. So you were all watching, hopefully, in 4K 60. I know that you probably all can't be watching it, but we had some people in the chat that said they've connected at 4K to watch the YouTube stream, which is really cool. So for those that don't know, the vMix Funtime Live Show is a monthly show where we take a look at all things live streaming, and we announce vMix things, and we show you different features and that type of thing. So that's what the show is. It's a pretty informal show, so don't take everything too seriously about what we say. So if you're watching us in the future, these videos go to our YouTube channel, so you can watch them later on as well. So if you want to chat along and ask us any questions, just go to vmix.com/live and you'll be able to join all of the friendly people in our chat room at the moment, and you can talk along with them. So now Martin's going to tell you a little bit what we've got going on today and what we've got for our 4K 60 setup.
And then I said about $40. Today we will be focusing on 4K and the often mentioned but not talked about high input performance mode that was added in vMix 20. But first to the setup image, where we do this every month. We tell everybody exactly what we're using in our production. Now for the audio side of things, it's the same deal. It's the Behringer UMC 404 4-channel audio interface with 2 wireless mic packs plugged in, and our trusty and favorite DPA-D-Fine microphones. On the camera side, we've mixed things up a little bit today. We have the Panasonic DVX200, but as our second camera, we have the Panasonic GH5, which is a brand new camera we've added to our lineup just for this show, and we'll talk about why we've chosen that camera a little bit later on. Tim's controlling everything, as always, with the X Keys 124 T-Bar. And everything is being connected to our mega system here, which is the i9-7900X, GTX 1080 Ti, 32 gigabytes of RAM. The capture cards we're using today are the Magewell All-in-One 4K Plus and the Yuan SC560. And everything is being streamed to YouTube today in 4K, 2160p, 59.94p at 13 megabits per second. Now 13 is the absolute lowest that YouTube recommend for 4K. That's due to our bandwidth capabilities here in Australia, but it seems to be working well for a static show. But if you've got any movement in your show, you'll want a lot higher than that. We'll talk about that also a little bit later. So that is the setup today. And this is the part of the show where we jump right into what we've learnt about 4K, putting this together. And so we have a couple of things to mention. I've put a couple of bullet points of the things I've learnt about 4K. So first of all, your vMix setup. You'll need vMix 20 to do 4K. You'll need to tick the box in the Settings Performance tab called High Input Performance Mode. You'll also want to use the hardware encoder for both your recording and your stream, and you'll want to record in MP4. This is so we can take full advantage of the graphics card when doing 4K, because 4K is very CPU intensive. For the clips that you'll want to be playing back throughout the show, you want to put them in MP4 format. That's the best playback format for 4K. The other things that we've learnt is about the cameras. 4K cameras usually only support 4K over HDMI. That's been our experience with the vast majority of them. Those that do support SDI are from, say, Blackmagic, but you need to pretty much use those with only Blackmagic capture cards that are compatible with them. The other SDI 4K cameras out there require quad SDI, which can be a little bit challenging to set up and find the right capture cards. AJ supports the capture cards that do 4K over 4 SDI. There might be a few other options out there, but that's the one we know about. But predominantly speaking, 4K is using HDMI out at this time. So if you're running long cable runs, that may be a concern for your production.
So those are the cameras that we're using. They're both HDMI. They do have SDI out, but it's for HD.
Yeah. And they both support 4K 60, which was crucial for the show today, but may not be what you would want to use in your show. We're using 4K 60 because we're pushing everything to the edge, but we actually recommend 4K 30 for your production. If you're looking to do sports, you'll probably want to go with HD at 60 frames a second, just because the majority of viewers aren't going to be able to watch 4K 60 anyway, and sports looks amazing in HD in 60 frames a second. So that would be the recommendation for that. So capture-wise, we recommend checking the specifications. Most only support single 4K input. This is in particular for Blackmagic design cards, where the specification shows multiple input ports, but in reality they only support a single input. Other capture cards are, as we mentioned, what we're using, the Magewell All-in-One 4K Plus, the Yuan SC560. Magewell, we've heard from Magewell, they'll also be announcing multi-input capture cards, and Yuan also have multi-input 4K a capture card that supports up to 4K 30 for HDMI inputs, and that's an SC560 N4. But there's a lot of different capture options available on our website. So, jumping right through, we've covered the content, the cameras, the capture cards you might need. CDN-wise, transcoding is a must for viewers. Not a lot of CDN providers can transcode 4K, so that's something you really need to check with them if you're planning to do 4K in any way, shape or form. YouTube has just been really amazing how they can transcode 4K 60 into 8 different feeds in real time in less than a minute of latency. That's sort of unheard of, and that's why we've chosen to use them today. So we're saying YouTube's recommended if you look at 4K for the time being. Unless you know your viewers absolutely are only going to watch in 4K, which is pretty rare right now, but we guess as internet gets faster and faster around the world, that will become more of something to think about. And finally, the bitrate. Now, YouTube recommends between 13 and 50 megabits per second. We have in vMix 20 in the latest update a bunch of quality profiles you can select for 4K streaming. All the way from 13 to, I believe, 50. We're choosing 13 today because our upload speeds here are 20 megabits per second in our internet connection here in Australia. And you want to leave plenty of headroom for 4K. So 13 is what we're streaming at. But you'll want to go a lot higher than that usually for your 4K production. At 30 frames a second, we'd recommend at least starting from 20. For the best results. And in fact, we found out when streaming to YouTube, they transcode up. So even though we're streaming at 13, YouTube will retranscode that to around 20 for 4K. So something to keep in mind, what you're streaming at may not actually be the bandwidth that your viewer needs to watch it. It may even be higher, as we've learnt today. So a quick run through of just a bunch of points about what we've learnt with 4K. One point I wanted to mention about the cameras is, as we mentioned, both of them support 4K 60 over HDMI. However, we ran into a fault with our second DVX200, which is why we've put the GH5 in today. To the second camera. For whatever reason, there seems to be a fault with our second DVX200 when you enable the 59.94p 4K output. The reason for that, we're not sure. We're going to get it sent back to Panasonic to have a look at. But 4K 60 is twice the HDMI bandwidth of 4K 30. So I figure, doubling it has put the circuitry, it's got a faulty chip in it or whatever for HDMI output, and it's just putting it over the edge. So that just, over the edge is the key thing with 4K 60. Everything is being pushed to its limits. Our show today, CPU-wise, is only around a total system CPU usage right now of 18%. This is on the 7900X CPU.
Which we'll talk about in a second.
Which we'll talk about in a sec. Render time is around 10 milliseconds for the most part. But that is our 4K tips section of the show, where we just go through what we learnt, and I hope you learnt something about that. So let's go to the next part of the show.
vMix presents Obsidian.
That's right. So now that we've gone through, we've tested it out, we've discovered all the things that are going on with 4K, with vMix, we've decided to announce a new reference system that we're going to be putting on our website. So currently we have 3 setups. We have, lower end HD, one for replay, and a laptop system. And now we're going to be adding one for 4K. So based on the specifications that we've built for our current computer, we're going to be adding that to our website probably later today once we've finished this video and uploaded it and that kind of thing, update the website. So we'll be adding what we're calling an Obsidian System, which is another precious gem like the other gems that we have on there, or a rock like we have on the other ones. So that's what we're going to be adding. That'll provide you with a full parts list again, like the other ones, so you can follow through and you can build it. Or you can get one of our friendly and helpful resellers to build you a computer based on those specifications, and they'll be able to help you out with specific things, installations and all that kind of stuff as well. So if you're kind of looking to get into 4K, 30, or even large amounts of HD, then that Obsidian system is going to be the one for you. So now Martin is going to go over some more points about 4K and what we've got.
Yeah, so the Obsidian system, we've been running for our monthly live show for a while now, but this is the first live show we're actually doing this in 4K 60. I mentioned before some of the CPU usage and render time specifications on it. Now, a couple of the key points in this system. You'll remember last year we attempted a 4K show in October as well. So it's been 1 year in the making of this system. We wanted to find a system that could support 4K reliably and stably. And this is the system we put together based on the X299 architecture, the 7900X i9 Intel CPU. It has 32 gig of DDR4 RAM. It has the top of the line NVIDIA 1080 Ti graphics card. That's not necessarily needed for the mixing side in vMix, but what the really interesting thing is, or exciting thing about this graphics card is it's pretty unique. It's got a much faster video encoder than even the 1080, and this video encoder built into it can support dual 4K 60 recording encodings. So that's why we're using the recording for that and the stream for that. We're taking full advantage of what the 1080 Ti is capable of, pushing it to 100% to do that. So with our recommended 4K 30 workflow, you'll have plenty of headroom there for the unexpected, but we're running things on 100% at the absolute edge of that graphics card. But that's why we recommend that in the Obsidian, not necessarily for the switching and the mixing side of things, but because you need to take advantage of that encoding to do the dual 4K 60 encodes. The 7900X has 10 cores, so that's why our CPU usage, as we mentioned, is quite low. It's hovering at around 18% total system CPU usage. We're running 2 4K 60 cameras, we're running a few video clips, we've got some static graphics, we're running chroma key in full 4K 60 on 2 cameras. We've got our microphones, of course, recording and streaming. But there's a little bit of headroom there CPU-wise for things like NDI inputs and things like that that you might want to add to the production. But the render time sometimes when playing video clips will jump up to 20 milliseconds. So this is what we mean by pushing things to the edge. It doesn't happen all the time, but it means if you're going to take the gamble and do a 4K 60 production, you might have a couple of frame drops here and there as a result of pushing things to the edge. So 4K 30 is why we recommend that. Now, of course, with the Obsidian system, you can use it for HD productions. And because of the X299 platform, you'll have 4 PCI Express ports to install a lot of HD capture cards if you want to go a high-end HD production. You'll be able to do up to 24 camera inputs in HD at full 60 frames a second using the Obsidian system. If that's what you're after, that's pretty great for sports and for other events where you need a lot of cameras always live in your production. And just to put this all in perspective, we're releasing the Obsidian system today. As I mentioned, we did a 4K show last year. That show was done on 2 computers, 2 Ruby systems. One was just for the switching, and one was for the recording in 4K and streaming only in HD. And it was using, I believe, 2 or 3 4K 30 cameras. We were recording in 4K 30, we were streaming in HD 30, and we were switching all on a separate computer, and we're using NDI to link to. So that's just 12 months ago. We were doing everything in 4K 30 and needed 2 computers. Now with the release of Obsidian, you can do that all in one on a single PC. That's a combination of this new graphics card, the 1080 Ti, but also some optimizations we've added into vMix 20. The high input performance mode is what we've culmination of 12 months of testing and research on the best possible settings and configuration in vMix for 4K production, and that tick box should be enabled if you're using a high number of inputs or you're doing 4K productions and you have a graphics card with at least 3 GB of onboard memory. What it essentially does is it takes advantage of that extra memory to reduce the render time. So if you're running in a production today in HD 60 frames a second, as a lot of our gaming customers, gaming streaming customers do, and you're running into higher render times than you thought, it's starting to jump into 20 milliseconds or 15 milliseconds plus, and you have a modern graphics card with more than 3 GB of onboard memory, turn on that input mode and contact us and let us know what your results are. We think you'll be pleasantly surprised at the reduction in render time as a result of that. Just anybody that's using lots of motion inputs with a graphics card with a lot of memory will benefit from this new tick box mode. It's not enabled by default because we know a lot of people out there have still got graphics cards with 1 GB of memory, and they will work just fine in vMix 20 and beyond. This is just a special mode for those that really want to push things to the edge and they want to go up into very high input productions. They want to do 60 frames a second across a lot of inputs for gaming, or they want to do 4K. So we recommend checking that out, and we're always interested in your feedback on that. So that's a new Obsidian system that will be released today. And one final note on 4K, because we've been seeing some chats on the various Facebook groups over the past couple of weeks. People are talking about 4K and HDR and what you need to do with the productions. And I just thought I'd clarify the definition of 4K. 4K for our purposes and for everybody streaming out there is the resolution of 3840 by 2160. So that's the resolution of Ultra HD, but at the consumer level, that is what everybody's referring to when they're referring to 4K. There is another resolution option out there which is slightly wider, and that's 4096 pixels wide. That is exclusively for cinema. You will not find a television that supports that. So that's why when people refer to 4K in the television or the streaming world, they're talking about 3840 by 2160p or Ultra HD. So I just thought I'd clarify that today. We are streaming in Ultra HD. This is also what YouTube recommends. So unless you have a cinema projector and you have a cinema camera, the 4096 is probably not going to be used for streaming in 4K. And that was a brain download of a lot of information. So I hope you've been able to digest that all and get something out of it if you are thinking, yes, I want to do 4K or I want to build a new system. The Obsidian will be on our website, as Tim mentioned, a little bit later on today. So that's Obsidian.
Okay, so that is 4K 60. That's our new reference PC that's talking about the high input performance mode, which was added that we never talked about, but this is the show we're talking about it. This is why we're talking about it, so we can do things like 4K 60 from one computer. So I think that's pretty cool. We were very nervous about it. So far, no drop frames, no issues. So it's pretty crazy how far things have come in the last year, that we were, kind of pushing 4K 30 with a couple of computers, NDI record, streaming in HD, but we're literally doing 4K 60 on one computer for recording, streaming, and all the production stuff, and nothing's fallen over yet. So I shouldn't have said that. But
and
yeah.
Tim put together all the graphics and all the videos in 4K 60, and his computer was on fire for like 2 weeks, rendering all of that stuff. So that's the thing you have to keep in mind as well. Everything's 4 times longer rendering when you're producing your assets. You got to produce graphics that are now 4K. They need a lot more detail to them.
Yep. And the same thing with your photos. You're thinking, oh, I can just crop that down to a 1920 1080, but most DSLRs, it's fairly large, but you've kind of got to crop it down just slightly and make sure you're going to get the full resolution. And then you realize, man, this photo's slightly blurry. If somebody actually watches this at 4K, they're going to see the blur and the lack of detail and stuff in these photos. And yeah, so rendering and producing everything in 4K 60 again is another thing that you've got to consider, not just the computer. It's actually preparing everything. It's only a small jump up, but really it's definitely not. So it's been a fun week. If you noticed on Twitter, I was like, yeah, it's great fun reproducing everything and recreating everything at 4K 60. And if you think, I've got a 1080 image, and then you're like, well, wait a minute, I can't just stretch that out. I have to put multiple ones to make it to fit in properly. So,
speaking of slideshows, though.
Yes. So I'm going to force everybody to sit through an Ibc slideshow that I've created. All of these images are in 4K. So we're going to quickly switch to that now, and I'm going to make you sit through our Ibc slideshow. So for those that were there, you'll be able to relive everything. For those that weren't there, I'm sorry, but I feel like I have to do a slideshow. So this is our booth. Ibc 2017, this is our booth. We had 2 workstations. One on the left, we had instant replay. The other one on the right, we had controllers and stuff for just normal production. So it was a good little booth. We had an area out the back, had a lot of traffic through. So it was a really quite exciting, really good week at Ibc. This was the start of the week. Looking really excited to be there after traveling for 34 hours. And it was raining and cold, and I didn't feel particularly great. So that's what we had on the right-hand side or left-hand side. We had a Vixia Camera, we had our MIDI controller, the X keys, and everything set up on that side, ready to go. And as you can see in the background, everything's still being set up, ready to get started. So this is the Vixia camera that we had. I can't quite see the model that it was. We should be able to see it in 4K, but I can't. But it was a
HFR 800.
That's it. So they were not particularly great quality, but they were very cheap, so we can just throw them in a bag, which we'll explain a little bit later on. And this is the JL Cooper Slow-Mo USB-J Mini. So they came out with a smaller version of the other one that we had previously, which is a little bit cheaper. And so we were using that for our instant replay demo, which Jens absolutely loved during the whole week. He did about, I would say, close to 50 million instant replay demos, and Jens was a great asset for the week. So if you're out there, if you're watching this, you did a great job, and we really appreciate it. So that's him using that. Here we are, looking exciting. He's excited to be there, as am I. Next door, we had the Bird Dog guys, so they had vMix set up using the Bird Dog studio. So that's what we had right next door to us. So it was good to have some Australian friends there. Now we did a live show at Ibc. If you want to check that out on our YouTube page, we had a live show which was a bit chaotic. It was a little bit better than the one that we did in Atlanta, but it was still very chaotic. And as you can see here, we've got Jens, Rudy's in the background, Martin K's on the camera, Martin there, I'm there, Dan's there. It was kind of everybody jump on board and hey, let's do a live show at Ibc, which was pretty fun. So here we are, actually in the live show. Jens is down there checking the comments on YouTube, and it was a pretty cool team effort. And here they were watching the show while we were doing the show. I don't know how they got the bandwidth. I think they were stealing our bandwidth as we were doing it. So yeah, thanks for that. Our awesome limited edition mouse pads for Ibc this year. If you got one of those, congratulations. These are our fancy shoes that we had as well. Is our awesome mouse pad. That's from Sasha, one of his photos. It's great to meet everybody there again. Now on the left-hand side here, this is me and Martin in front of me, where we carried all of our booth equipment, all of it. The laptops, the cameras, the controllers, microphones, keyboards, mouses, everything was packed into our backpacks. And then Martin tried to lead us to our storage facilities, which he'd been to once. Did we get lost? Yes, we did, but we eventually found it. And so we took all of our stuff. We biked it all there, Jens, myself, and Martin. Martin's a cyclist, so me and Jens did our best to keep up on our rental bikes. So that was a fun experience, to say the least. And on the right-hand side, we have we had some advertising out the front, the vMix logos, and then videos that were playing, and that was back of Paul Richards' heads for PTZ Optics. Now, one thing that you may or not know about vMix is that it's used quite heavily in the Netherlands or the Dutch korfball league. And for those that don't know, korfball is a sport that's really popular in the Netherlands and Belgium. So they actually use vMix for a lot of the club games, for the live streaming of those, and also the live streaming of the playoffs and the grand final. You can have a look on our solutions page, and you can see more information about how they use it. So I got an invitation from Andre to go to his club in Sassenheim. They are the current Dutch korfball champions. So here I am in Sassenheim at Top, which is the name of the club. And it was 12 degrees, so we were playing some korfball outside. While we were there at Sassenheim, it was in the middle of what they call Feestweek, which is the party week of Sassenheim. So there were people partying everywhere, and it was a very interesting experience out in Sassenheim. So those guys use it for their club, live streaming. As we mentioned on the pre-show, they have full gigabit internet, so they're able to live stream and provide Wi-Fi and stuff at their area. Then I went down to a place called Papendrecht. I'm sure I'm saying that incorrectly. So this is an outdoor korfball game that they had going on while I was there. And the guys at the Papendrecht Korfball Club, which is the biggest in Europe, they use vMix for all of their live production. They have like a 5 or 6 person team. They have 5 cameras, I think. They have a roving camera. They have IP cameras hanging from the rafters. And as you can see there, they get quite a few people at the games. And then they do a live stream. And on the right-hand side, they have a timer that vMix, they put a Raspberry Pi in a timer, which then converts it to something vMix can read. So they run the timing off that computer. And as you can see, they've got the replay here. They've got an APC Mini for their production. So it's an awesome setup. Everything, you can't see a cable or a wire. It's incredible the way that they've set up all of their cameras and all of their production equipment. So they have people out the front on the right-hand side of that picture, that's actually on the court, and then they have a separate production room where someone's actually switching and mixing it all from a separate air-conditioned room. So Brian is lucky he gets a separate room where he can do all the production from there. So here they are here. This is the Paycasse media team for the korfball. So a big thanks to Andre at Top, Brian, Thomas, Maya, I'm sure I've got that wrong, and Grata as well from Papendrecht. They showed me around their facilities, they showed me their entire setup, and it was really great to be able to just check it all out and see how they're using vMix for their live streaming. So you can see more information on our solutions page about how they're using it for their sporting league, and yeah, so that was really cool. So thanks to Europe. This is Dan. He's in Rotterdam hanging out. So thanks to everybody in Europe for coming to IBC. It was a really great week. It was super busy. So thanks to everybody that we met, all of the keys that we gave away, all the mouse pads and all that kind of stuff. So thanks to everybody for IBC. That's all I can say.
And thanks to everyone that's voted for us in the Streaming Media Readers' Choice Awards. How's that for a segue? Voting has now closed, but thanks for everybody for voting for us. They will announce the finalists, I believe, in a couple of weeks at streamingmedia.com. We haven't won yet, but we're up and coming new company out there in the streaming world still. So maybe this year's different.
Maybe this year.
But Tim's got a banana shirt he will be wearing, I hope, if we win. But thanks everybody for voting for that. And of course, that event happens they announce the actual final winners for the Streaming Media Readers' Choice Awards in November, the Stream Media West show that's happening on the November 1st and the 2nd. And we have a booth there at booth 307. But before that, we will be in New York just in a few days' time for the NAB New York show. That's running from October 18th to 19th. That's Wednesday, Thursday. You can still go to our website and buy an events pass if you'll be in New York or you'll be in the area. You can catch a train. A few people catch the train to New York from the surrounding states. So, you can make the plans. There might still be some hotels available. It is New York, the most hotels I've ever seen. So you might find a way at the last minute if you still want to come by and visit us. So that's in New York. And then after that, in a couple of weeks after that, we'll be at Stream Media West. And in between those, if you're going to TwitchCon, you might find Tim wandering around. He's checking it out, but we won't have a booth at TwitchCon. But Tim's going to find out what the deal is at that show. So that's, I think I've covered everything on that. And now it is time for Q&A. So isn't this such a feature-packed show? At least we think so. A lot's going on. A lot's been happening. 4K is what it's all about today. So get your questions in. It's like a 1-minute delay. So if you haven't got your questions in, maybe we won't get to them in time. But a few people have asked some pretty
As you scroll through, people can ask the questions, and then you can get back to the ones that people are asking about.
That's right. So people have been asking about, 4K. There's some reports about how some TVs do not support YouTube and 4K built in. We found that you might have to go with a Chromecast Ultra. That's Google's own 4K dongle that you can plug into your 4K capable TV. So that's probably the best way to reliably watch 4K from YouTube on a TV. So the first question that people have asked about 4K is replay. Can you do replay in 4K? The answer to that question is not yet. We still have the full vMix replay system built in that will work fine on Obsidian systems for HD cameras. And that's why I recommend for sports HD 60 for the Obsidian system. The replay fully supports that. 4K, as we mentioned, is very CPU intensive to encode, and that's why we're using the NVIDIA graphics card to do both the recording and streaming today using the hardware encoder. But it only has 2 encodes on it, so the replay misses out, and that's why replay is still HD only for now. But the Obsidian system is an amazing system for HD replay productions. So, you can be 4K ready with the Obsidian, but in the future, if 4K replay it becomes a reality, but you'll be able to right now do high-end HD 60 sports productions using the Obsidian system. So they were talking about the CPU percentage of the show. It's around 18% total system usage. vMix is around 10% of that. The difference in that is the background FFmpeg process that's actually doing the streaming side of things. But that's just mainly just to encode the audio and to process the video. It's using the hardware encoder on the NVIDIA GeForce 1080 Ti graphics card to do that.
So somebody asked about the i7 8700K. We will be buying one at some point to throw it in one of our other computers and we'll test it out.
Yeah, so Intel is releasing CPUs at a much more rapid pace than we're used to.
Yep.
We had the first Ruby system, which is 6700K, and then they released the 7700K, which what feels like yesterday, but I guess it's been a year already. And now they've announced the 8700K, which is actually a big boost for the consumer platform. It's the first 6-core Intel processor on the sort of consumer, more affordable platform. So we're interested in getting a hold of that CPU. And we also hear rumors Intel's going to release an 8-core consumer CPU affordable option next year. But we'll test that out, see what the improvement is for vMix going from 4 to 6. I'm sure it'll be great for replay and other sort of multi-core capable features in vMix. Great for additional NDI sources as well. And people have been always asking us, when's NDI3 going to be released? We're in the middle of testing that right now. We should hopefully have a new tech PTZ camera to test today, actually, so we can integrate full support for that in NDI 3.0. People talk about 4K and Ultra HD. Yeah, we talked about how Ultra HD is what 4K is at the consumer level, unless you are in a cinema. 4096 pixels is only really for cinema applications, slightly wider aspect ratio. In fact, it's probably, they use anamorphic 4096 as well for most cinema 4K releases, which is a much wider image than standard widescreen 16:9.
Bought my Star Wars tickets last night.
So they're saying, are we
Excited.
recording all cameras, or just the main out? We're just recording the main recording. I think if we used multi-quarter in 4K, we would definitely need the top-of-the-line Quadro P6000. But even then, you would struggle because the top-of-the-line GeForce graphics card can only do 8K 60 is what they're saying, or 8K 30, which works out to be 2 4K 60s, and then you've maxed out the encoding chip on it. So even though the Quadros, as many people know, support multiple 4K encodes, more than 2, you're really maxing it out at 4K 60.
So this computer has a Samsung Evo M.2 SSD.
Yes.
That's what we're running on it.
So the M.2s are great because you just plug it into the motherboard. You don't need to put it in a slot in the case. It's great for low form factor, although this system, as you would have seen in the setup image, is a bit of a beast. It has liquid cooling. All the recommendations will be on our website within the next couple of hours. They're saying are the video files stored on the SSD? Yeah, so everything's all just being done on a single SSD for this production today. Yeah, they're just talking about the Obsidian, 4K TVs, any plans to use include a second NVIDIA card. We recommend single graphics card setups. There is no advantage for vMix to use SLI or dual graphics card setups. Even if you did, the dual encoding restriction still applies for GeForce cards. It's a software restriction that NVIDIA's made on their GeForce cards, and it applies regardless of how many graphics cards you were to install. But not to get too technical, but if you install more than one graphics card, any live video source has to be sent to both. And so you're halving the be available internal bandwidth for shifting video around the computer. And for 4K, that's a bad idea. And one other point about the motherboard as well. We have the recommended motherboard. Our motherboard, it has 4 PCI Express ports on it. They are in the 16-speed, 8-speed, 4-speed, and 4-speed, going down the line after the graphics card. So make sure when you buy these capture cards that you put it in the right slot. For example, if you buy a Blackmagic Decklink, the 8-port Quad 2 card for HD, you want to put that in the 16 or the by 8 ports. Don't put them in the by 4 port because it's a by 8 card. However, the Magewell cards, both the 4K ones, the HD ones, and the Yuan cards are all PCI Express by 4. So you can put those in the final 2 by 4 ports, or you can put them in the faster ones. It won't impact things, but that's why you can use 4 capture cards. If you say use a combination of cards, like if you chose 4 Magewell 4 input cards, for example, you could do 16 HD inputs. If you chose the Yuan 4K cards, you could put 2 of those in for 8 4K 30. I think we recommend up to 6 on our reference systems page for that, but you could pick and choose HD. You could have 4 HD cameras, 2 4Ks. Maybe you only want 1 4K camera for the entire field, and maybe you want to crop that up into smaller HD images in your production. There's a lot of different ways you can use 4K, and of course vMix supports full conversion back and forth between HD and 4K, so you can mix and match the resolutions of your cameras, so you can start out small and slowly expand as you get more cameras. Because the Obsidian System Pro is going to retail around $5,000. So, that's the price of one 4K camera. Speaking of cameras as well, Panasonic make the most affordable 4K cameras that support HDMI output at 4K 60. They have the GH5, they have the DVX200, they have the UX 180, which is the more affordable 4K option than the DVX200. Then you have the Sony X70 or the new Z90 with the 4K add-ons that can do 4K. They're around the $2,000, $3,000 mark, but they're 4K 30 cameras. There's new Canon 4K cameras coming out in just the next couple of days. Believe it'll be shipping in November in B&H. It's actually a couple of weeks away actually on that. So there's more 4K cameras coming out there in the pipeline. So keep a lookout for them. And that is Q&A for the show. If you have any other questions, put them in the forums. Put them in the post show. We hope this has been informative. If you're looking to do 4K, this was the show to watch, and we hope you got something out of it.
Yeah, I don't know too many other people that are doing live 4K 60 streaming.
I would say we're the first to do a full 4K 60 production using a single PC. Perhaps others have tried using vMix, but at least vMix is the first to offer that. So it's pretty exciting. And our show's now 38 minutes long. We had a lot to pack in. Thanks everybody for watching. It's been a fun show. I hope some of you were able to watch it in 4K. If you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, that's great. You can allow it to buffer for like half an hour, so you can start watching it in 4K 60.
Yeah, so we're recording at full quality, so 75 megabit 4K 60. So it's going to take a while to upload, but it'll be pretty decent quality when it actually gets up there.
But check out all the 4K info on our website when we post it up in the next couple of hours. Download the latest vMix 20.0.0.30. Turn on the high input performance mode if you have a fast system, or start thinking about that Obsidian system. Contact our resellers to build one for you, or if you build PCs already, have a go yourself. But that's the new Obsidian, and this is the 4K 60 show. We'll see you at one of the trade shows or on our next monthly live show sometime in November. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. Follow vMix HD on all of the social medias.